it's time to talk about all the garments I knit in 2024. Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, my name is Addie and I am the host of the Knits by AJ knitting podcast, but today we are not having a knitting podcast episode. I am going to be going through all of the garments that I finished in 2024. So a brief overview of 2024. I finished 69 items altogether. That includes garments, socks, homeware, accessories, all that jazz. Overall, I knit 8 items for my husband, 15 for my daughter, 37 for myself, and I did 9 gifts and like bits of homeware and various bits and bobs like that. So yes, I've got 23 things to go through today, all of the garments that I did in 2024. I'm not going to go into them in like great detail. If you do want to see any of them in great detail, I did podcast about all of them, apart from one which was featured in Vlogmas. And so if you do want to see them in more detail, then you can go and watch previous episodes. But yeah, and also if I did that, we would be here for hours because I can waffle on about knitting for days, absolute days. So instead I'm just going to go through the pattern, the yarn, roughly how long it took me to knit, and finally some thoughts on it now that I've kind of had it in my wardrobe or in my husband or my daughter's wardrobe for a little while. So yeah, without further waffle, let's get into some knitting. Oh, also I have ordered these chronologically in order of when I finished them. So first up, January. I didn't finish any projects in January. Well, I didn't finish any garments in January. I did finish some projects. But yeah, so I have no finished garments for January. Okay, so let's get into February. So the first thing I finished in February was a self-drafted hoodie for my husband. I knit this up in Cascade 220 in the colour Jet. And I cast it on in mid-January, cast it off at the end of February. This is the only one that I don't have like proper dates for, because it was a self-drafted pattern and for some reason I didn't put it into Ravelry. But here it is. And it's just a raglan, all over stockinette hoodie with double knit edgings and buttons and pockets as well. And I knit this as a replacement for one that I knit for him in 2023 that turned out too big, and that wasn't so that one wasn't successful obviously because it turned out too big. This one, sorry, my neighbours are moving their bins if you can hear them. And this one wasn't all that successful either. It got a few wears after I finished it, and then we realised that the sleeves were too short, and so it kind of went into a pile of things that I had on my list to fix. And also it's really, really thick because it is Cascade 220. It's just a bit too hot for the use case that the other hoodies that I've knit for my husband have, where he wears them to the office. Now his office is kind of very well temperature controlled, like they have proper central heating and air conditioning and everything, so it never really gets that cold in there. Not like it does like when you're at home and like the heating's just kicking in and everything. It's very much more like it's kept a lot warmer than we keep our house anyway. So yeah, it's unfortunately kind of just sat there as an unworn knit in his pile of knitwear, and so realistically we have decided that we're probably going to end up frogging this and we're going to reuse the yarn to knit something else. So yeah, not the most successful project to start on, but it is something that I knit in 2024. So yeah, I love the yarn, like hence why we want to frog it and reuse the yarn for something else. He likes the yarn, but it's just not best used in this project. And so we're going to use it for something else. And we'll reuse the buttons and everything as well. So yeah, not the most successful, but the yarn will get reused. Next up we have a project for my daughter. So this is the Dot Sweater Kids by PERNILLE LARSEN from Knitting for Olive. And I knit this up in a load of scraps. So I used Cascade Heritage, I'm not sure what colour it is, I haven't taken a note of it, and to be honest I think it was a skein without a ball band or like a half used ball of yarn, so I didn't have the ball band, so I didn't have the colour, but it is like a very pale kind of blue toned white, so yeah, I'm not sure. The other main colour that I used was the Lonely Knitter Luxe Sock, which is her 75/25 sock base in the colour Hold the Door, which was from her Ice and Fire collection, and the contrast colour is Under the Olive Tree Yarns sock in the colour Fiesta Beach. And I love this jumper. It is so cute. It was really good fun to knit. I alternated the two main colours, so I knit one round in one and then the next round in the other, so that I could blend them together, because they were actually fairly different colours. And then obviously I held that with, and then I had a third strand for the contrast colour. And I cast this on January the 21st, and I cast it off on February the 13th. I knit the second size, and I think this pattern was one that was made for fingering weight and mohair, and I decided to omit the mohair because my daughter does not like it. She finds it quite itchy. And yes, so my daughter absolutely loves this sweater as well. The only thing I will say is that I wish I had knit this in a bigger size, because this is already too small for her. It's fine if she wears it over a dress and then we kind of like tuck up the body a little bit, but the sleeves are already running really short. Now I do kind of remember that I knit the second size and I was already running really low on yarn, and I think I was playing yarn chicken towards the end of this. So I think with the yarn that I had available, I wasn't really able to knit the sleeves any longer, but I did add some length to the body. So now I'm kind of wishing that I had kept the body at the length that I should have knit it to for size 2. I think I knit it to the length of size 3, and I had added more length to the sleeves so that she could wear it as like a cropped jumper over the top of her dresses or underneath dungarees. But it's not the end of the world. I would knit this again. The only thing that does kind of irritate me a little bit is the fact that there are no short rows in the back neck. So A, it's really hard to tell which way around this goes, and B, it kind of sort of sits very high up at the front because it doesn't have any extra fabric there to allow it to drop down at the back. But yeah, I would definitely knit this again. It was such a fun knit, and she really likes it, so I'm sure I will end up knitting her a new version in a bigger size so that she can wear it again in the future. I mean, to be honest, she'll still wear this. She just might need to wear a long sleeve top underneath it whilst it's really cold, otherwise she's going to get cold wrists. She'll just have to have 3/4 length sleeves. So that is the dot sweater? Dot sweater. Yes, dot sweater, kids. I always want to call this the spot sweater, but that is a different jumper altogether. Okay, so the last thing that I finished in February was a test knit. It was my first test knit of the year. I did 4 test knits last year, and this is the Ivy top by HIRIS of HIRIS Makes. Whilst I was knitting this, it was called the Cabled Summer Top. It hadn't got a name yet, so if you are going to go back and check out any of the podcasts that this appeared in, then it is under that name, not the Ivy top, because it got its name just before release. So I knit this up in Filcolana Saga in the colour Peach Blossom, and this was when I really fell in love with this yarn. It's a fingering weight woolen spun 100% lamb's wool, and it's just the lightest, airiest, warmest, loveliest yarn. I think it's so soft. I absolutely love it, and I want to use it a lot more in the future. I actually want to knit another one of these in the future, but I'll move on to that in a little bit. So I cast this on January the 17th. I cast it off on February the 24th, and I knit the first size. So as for the design, it's an fingering weight all over cable knit t-shirt that has some built-in negative ease, and I absolutely love the fit of this t-shirt. I wear it all the time, to be honest. I wear it underneath other jumpers, I wear it underneath cardigans, I wear it in the spring and the autumn, and I really want to knit myself a long sleeved version. The joy of this, I wore this on a really warm day when it came out. I can't remember when the pattern came out. Either way, I wore this on a really warm day on the day it came out, and I wasn't too hot because the yarn is so light and airy, and because you've got some beautiful eyelets in there, it kind of allows it to be a little bit cooler than you would think it is. So it's a really good kind of like all-rounder t-shirt. I mean, obviously I'm not going to wear this when it's like 35 degrees outside. I'm not going to wear any wool when it's 35 degrees outside because that's just too hot. But I can definitely wear this in sort of like 20-degree weather without really feeling like I'm about to boil. But yeah, this is one of those yarns that's absolutely beautiful after it's been washed and blocked. I think before you wash it, it can kind of be a little bit underwhelming. And maybe a little bit scratchy, but it definitely softens up beautifully with blocking and even more with wear. But yes, I absolutely loved knitting this pattern. Like I said before, I want to knit another one. It's got a set-in sleeve design, and this was really the year that I fell in love with a set-in sleeve. I absolutely love them. I want more set-in sleeve garments. I think they fit beautifully because they do just sit up on the shoulder, and because you usually end up picking up stitches, it means that there's just that little bit more structure. But yes, I absolutely loved knitting this. It was a really, really fun test knit. It was a really fun knit, and I think it's just got the right amount of engaging aspects to it compared to also like just being able to kind of just get on with it and memorize the pattern really quickly. But yeah, absolutely love this. And so that was my first knitted tee of the year and my first test knit. Okay, so that was everything that I knit in February. March, first up we have got another project for my daughter. So this is the Tulip sweater by Hip Knit Shop. I don't feel like I can ever say that without accidentally saying the wrong word. And I knit this up in Drops Air in the colours light pink, lemonade, morning mist, parrot green and magenta. Now this is a really oversized, boxy 80s style sweater with like all over colourwork. It's a drop shoulder and I worked it bottom up. And I cast this on March the 2nd and I cast it off on March the 9th. So this was really, really quick. It's knit on really big needles, and the Drops Air it's a blown yarn, so it really kind of fills out. So you can't see any of the floats in there despite the fact that it is a really, really loose gauge. So this is one of the most reached for garments from my daughter's wardrobe, especially in the spring. Obviously it is very springy, it's got these beautiful tulips on it, and yeah, she really loves it. It's so light, it has like no weight to it, which I think is part of the reason why she likes it so much, because she doesn't notice that she's wearing it. And to be honest, it's fun. It's really bright colours. It's kind of everything that well, I suppose she was 3 at this point, a 3-year-old girl would really, really enjoy. So it's a bottom up drop shoulder construction. So there is some colour work that was worked flat, which to be honest wasn't the worst. I thought it was going to be a lot more annoying than it was, but because most of the top half of this jumper is striped, it means that it wasn't really too much of an issue. Most of the colour work that you were doing was stripes, and I think there was maybe like 3 or 4 rounds where you were actually working colour work on... No, I think maybe there was only 2 rounds where you were working the colour work on the back. Sorry. Yeah, on the back of the work, so from the wrong side. So yeah, it wasn't really all that kind of daunting in the end. The sleeves are then picked up and you work them from the top to the bottom, and it's like a puff sleeve. And yeah, more colour work on there, but it's all in the round. So these will work. The one thing I will say is that this was worked up on 8mm needles, and it made my wrists hurt so much. To the point where I was kind of like, I just want to get this done so that I don't have to knit it anymore. And I think that's a mixture of the yarn and the needles. I don't think I've ever worked anything on an 8mm needle before. I tend to gravitate more towards fingering weight or DK weight projects. So I think the biggest needle that I tend to use is maybe a 5. Usually I would go for a 4.5. Occasionally I will use a 5. So this was a real kind of like a bit of a shock to my wrists to have to work up something on such a big needle, and it was just very, very kind of cumbersome. And yeah, I think just the use of the larger needle and the yarn maybe not having as much bounce in it as like a 100% non-superwash wool just made my wrists a little bit sort of unhappy. I think also the fact that I work my colour work two-handed, so it was a rhythm that my wrists were not used to. Hello. So yeah, it was a rhythm that my arms and wrists weren't used to, and so yeah, it kind of made them feel a little bit, hello, a little bit uncomfortable. What you up to? You wanna come up? Up you come then. Up. Come on. Do you need help? Honestly. Okay. Right, settle down then. Okay, second thing that I finished in March. Oh my goodness. This is a lot more awkward when you have a dog on your lap. Okay, so the second thing I finished in March was another garment for myself, and this is my Daft Days cardigan by Rebecca CLOW, or the Crayabea, and I knit this up in Filcolana PERNILLE and a load of mini skeins from the Lonely Knitter on her Luxe sock base, which is her 75/25 merino nylon base. And so most of these were from the Ice and Fire collection that I knit up a striped sweater by Andrea Mowry in, when did I knit that? I think I knit that in 2023. And then some were from her last club of 2023, which was a Frozen club. Well, it was based on Frozen, I think it was a Disney club. And so some of them are colours from that. So I knit up size 1, and I cast this on March the 14th, and I cast it off on March the 31st. And this was one of my favourite knits of 2024. I love this cardigan. I wore it a lot. I think it's great fun. It's a perfect balance of like colourful but also neutral, so you can kind of wear it with most things and add a little bit of colour to your outfit, but it's also not too in your face. And it was a great way to use up some of my leftover mini skeins. The slip stitch pattern makes it a little bit more interesting to knit than just like a standard drop shoulder stockinette cardigan with stripes, and it kind of kept it interesting because you were obviously changing colour so often. I used these massive statement buttons from Pigeon Wishes, which I absolutely love, but I think this kind of leads us into the problems that I have with this cardigan. So first of all, the neckline is just way too big. I actually wore this the other day and kind of stood in front of the mirror and did like a fold of all of the extra fabric that I had in the neckline, and worked out that I actually need to take out like, I think it's like 12 stitches. So yeah, the neckline is too wide, it falls off my shoulders, it's really irritating. I even tried wearing it with my dungarees and kind of like tucking it underneath the strap of my dungarees, and even that doesn't work, it still falls down. And because of that, it also limits what I can wear it with. It means that I can only wear it with like a vest underneath or a really wide neck t-shirt, of which I don't have a lot of. All of my t-shirts are kind of quite, I mean, you can still see this one like underneath this jumper, they're quite high necked. And I just feel like it looks funny if I have a high neck t-shirt on and then my cardigan doesn't start until like down here. I feel like that looks a bit odd, and I don't really like it. And the other thing is that the button bands, I think I sewed my buttons on too close to the edge of the button band, and so they kind of gape. Despite the fact that this is really oversized on me, it just means that it kind of falls apart. And I think that's also because my buttons are quite big, and the yarn that I use as my main colour, the Filcolana PERNILLE, is a sport weight, and so it's just not very strong at this gauge because this pattern was written for a DK weight, so it's just not quite as strong and structured as it would be if I was using a thicker yarn. So my plans to fix this, because I do want to be able to wear this, so I do have to do something with it, because right now I don't consider it to be completely wearable and I don't reach for it because of all the problems that I've just talked about. So my plan is to fix this year and redo the neckband and the button bands and re-sew on the buttons so that I can wear this more, because it is a lovely piece and I do absolutely love wearing it and it fits in with my wardrobe so well. So yeah, another sort of slightly unsuccessful knit, but still one that I absolutely love. So yes, that was my Daft days. And that was the last thing that I finished in March. Okay, and on to April. So I only finished one garment in April, and it was the festival dress by PetiteKnit. This was the only garment pattern that I knit up by PetiteKnit this year, and it irritated me just a little bit too much for my liking. So I will get onto that in a minute. First of all, I knit this up in Woolly Knit Super Soft Merino 4-ply in the colour Rose as my main colour, and I used a skein of Wiku yarns in the colour Homestead. Unfortunately, Wiku yarns are not dyeing anymore, but that was what my contrast colour was. And it's a 100% superwash merino fingering weight yarn. So I knit this up in the age 3 to 4, which is the 5th size in this pattern, and I cast it on February the 24th, and I cast it off on April the 18th. So this was also the only knit dress that I did this year. I think I had grand plans to knit a lot of knitted dresses for my daughter, and then only knit this one this year. She does have another one, which was the Dagmar dress by PetiteKnit, but I knit that in 2023. And she does wear these fairly often, but I kind of just felt that 2 was enough for her wardrobe. So as always with the PetiteKnit pattern, it was fairly easy to follow. All of the instructions were relatively easy to follow. It was written out really nicely. And it does fit really well, I will give it that. But it took a little bit more brain power than I wanted it to, because so I found that in the increases for the yoke, you didn't always end on an even number for every size, and so if you ended on an odd number, it meant that the seam, like the beginning of round, is in the back, and I think you can still kind of see it. But I changed mine so that I always ended up on an even number, despite the fact that the pattern wanted me to end up on an odd number for every other increase round. And if I ended up on an odd number, it would mean that there would be an extra stitch between the two kind of like bobbly stitches. And I thought that was going to look really obvious that that was where the seam was. I thought it made it look really kind of disjointed and really sort of, I wasn't happy with the way it looked. So I ended up having to fiddle around with all of my increases to make sure that every single increase round ended up on an even number. And yes, this was purely for aesthetics. It was purely for like something that I chose to do. I could have just knit it to the pattern and had that extra stitch between the two bobbles, but I just thought it was going to look really naff. And it kind of annoyed me that it wasn't uniform throughout all of the sizes. And yeah, it kind of just put me off off this pattern a little bit. So, but now that it is finished, she does wear this quite a lot. She does enjoy wearing it. You can see obviously like a couple of the sort of stitches have been pulled a little bit. So it's quite easy to fix them. I just go in and just sort of pull it from the back to sort of reorientate them a little bit. It does get caught on things every now and then. Not the end of the world, but it is kind of frustrating for her because she likes it to look nice and neat. But yeah, other than that, I think it's a really successful little dress. She absolutely loves it. She does have the jumper version, which she wore yesterday. I knit that up a couple of years ago, which it still fits. But that's DK and this is fingering weight. But yeah, another one that it ended up really nice as a finished object, but the knitting process of it kind of wasn't the best. But yeah, that is the festival dress. Okay, so now we're in May, almost halfway through the year somehow. I'm flying through these. So first thing that I finished up in May was the unicorn sweater, which was a pattern by Wool & Beyond, and it's another thing that I knit for my daughter. And I used leftover yarns from her Tulip sweater. So again, it was Drops Air in light pink, magenta, lemonade, and the blue is Morning Mist. So I massively overbought for the Tulip sweater, but actually it was quite a happy accident because it meant that I had enough yarn left in stash to knit her this, and she loves this sweater. I mean, what 4-year-old girl does not love a big airy jumper with a unicorn on the front knit in ridiculously garish colours. But yeah, I knit this in size 2, but I decided after I had finished the body that it was too short, so I pulled back the ribbing and I added in some extra length to knit it to the length of size 3, and so I just kind of worked out where I was in the chart and then just kind of lengthened it accordingly, so that it kind of matched up with the size 3 chart but also didn't. I'm sorry, I keep finding bits in these. I've pulled these out of everybody's drawers, and so they have been worn a couple of times and then like tucked away, so there are kind of like bits of fluff and stuff stuck to them. But you know, that's the whole point in doing this video. So I cast this on April the 23rd and I cast it off on May the 1st. So it was another relatively quick knit. It was knit on fairly big needles. I think it was knit on 5mm or 5.5mm needles, so not quite as big as the Tulip sweater, and I didn't have any of the problems with the wrist pain when I was knitting this as I did when I was knitting the Tulip sweater. I also didn't realise that I mostly knit colour work projects for my daughter this year. It seems to have been a big year of colour work for me, and I didn't really realise it. But this one is slightly different because it was knit using Intarsia in the round, which was a brand new process for me. I had never done, I think I'd knit Intarsia before, but I'd never done it in the round. So that was really interesting, and it was really good fun. I absolutely loved knitting up this jumper. I loved the fact that you were only really using one colour at each time, but you were still getting this beautiful motif on the front. And I love the fact that there aren't really any floats in the back, so there's nothing for her to get her fingers caught on when she's putting it on or anything. But I did kind of have to teach myself how to best like manage my yarns so that I didn't get little holes where I change colour. So that was quite nice as well, to try and learn something new after such a long time. But yeah, unfortunately, because I did finish this in May, it didn't get as much wear as I maybe wanted it to, but it is now getting in, now that we're getting into spring, this has started coming out a little bit more now that we're like we've put away the Christmassy stuff. So I think this is going to be a really good layer for her as we go into spring, because it's really light, but it also is quite nice and warm because it is in that drops air, and so the blown yarn kind of traps the warmth in a bit more. Also, because it is so light, it kind of means that she doesn't really feel like she's wearing a layer, so it means that we can kind of just chuck it on without it being like overly bulky or getting in the way when she's playing. But yeah, I think this is going to be a real staple for her for spring. Not that she didn't wear it in the autumn, but I think it's just going to get more wear in spring, mostly because of the colour palette. But yeah, I would definitely knit this again. It was really good fun. I really like these sort of like fringing bits that you put on afterwards. I think they're really effective. And I really like that the colour work goes back around the back as well. So it's just, yeah, it's just a lovely, really well thought out pattern. It was written really nicely. It was really easy to follow. And yeah, I think it's great for like using up any sort of odd balls of yarn, because it really didn't use very much at all. So yeah, absolutely love this. We'll probably end up knitting her another one when this one doesn't fit, because she does love this jumper. Okay, so the next thing I finished up in May was a big project for me, one that took me a very, very long time. So this is the Alder Sweater by CLOW of the Creia Bear, and I knit this up out of BC Garn Loch Lomond in the colours Pine and Sand, and I knit up size 2. So this took me a long time to knit. I cast it on February the 16th and I cast it off on May the 5th. And I feel like this was kind of like my Everest. It just felt like it was going on forever. So it's an all over mosaic knit colourwork pattern worked up in 2 colours, and you use slip stitches and decreases to create like this beautiful pattern and texture. But I just don't feel like I ever really got into the flow of knitting it. I just don't really feel like I ever kind of got to the point where I had memorised the pattern. And so it just took me a really, really long time to knit it. It was never something that I could just pick up, knit a little bit of and put it down. It was something that was like a big thing, having to pick it up because I'd have to get the pattern out and all this, that and the other. And so yeah, it just felt a bit clunky knitting it, which I don't think was actually on the pattern. I think it was just on me. I just couldn't get my head around the repeat, and just so it took me a long time to kind of get into it. I also realised when I was knitting this that I just wasn't going to want to like have to pull it back if any of the lengths were wrong, because I just didn't think I was going to be able to work out which round I was on in the pattern. So I did a fair bit of like mid-project blocking of this, which also elongated the process a bit as well. But in the end, absolutely love this jumper. I wear it so often, and I think that is mostly also because of the yarn. So this was the first time I used BC Garn's Loch Lomond, and it wasn't the last, and it will not be the last, because I absolutely love it. So it's like a DK weight woolen spun yarn, and it comes in these beautiful earthy tones, and they're all kind of like a tweed. So you get little flecks of like red in the pink, and you even get bits of the pink and the green and everything. So they go, all the colours like blend in really well together, and it's just beautiful. It's bouncy, it's light, it's warm and airy. I love this yarn. So this garment weighs absolutely nothing, and a bit like with the ones that I knit in Drops Air for my daughter, I don't feel like I'm ever wearing a layer in this. I don't notice that I'm wearing it, and because it is quite kind of light and airy, it's got a beautiful drape, and it just sits really well on the body. I just absolutely love it. But yeah, the yarn blocks out beautifully. I wear this next to skin all the time, never have a problem, and it just kind of, this project kind of sparked my love affair with this yarn. It gives great stitch definition. I think actually it was kind of like the perfect yarn for this project, because I think although it's like a slip stitch pattern, the row gauge is quite short, and so I think it could end up being really quite like a heavy knit. So I think the woolen spun yarn really kind of like lightened this up a bit and made it much easier to wear. Again, unfortunately, because I did finish this in May, it then got very hot, and so I wasn't really able to wear this, but I have kind of made up for that in the autumn winter. I've worn it a lot. So this yarn has held up absolutely beautifully. Like, obviously I've worn it quite a lot. It's gotten a little bit fuzzy, but not to the point where it actually like needs deep hilling or anything. I think it's just doing really, really well. I'm considering knitting something up for my husband using this yarn. He is quite hard wearing on his knits, not because he's like rough with them, but because he wears them a lot. So I'm wondering if actually, because I wear this a lot, maybe it will be a good option for knitting something for him in, because I am constantly having to deep hill his garments. But yes, that is my Alder Sweater. It's one of my favourite knits of this year. It's, yeah, I'm really, really glad I knit this in the end, and I'm really glad I finished it, because like I say, I do wear it a lot, and yeah, I just love it. So last thing that I knit up in May was another test knit, and it was also another Rebecca CLOW pattern. So this is the Sanna Cardigan by Rebecca CLOW, and it is my second test knit of the year, and I used BC Garn Big Bio Balance in the colour Marine, and I knit up size 1. So I cast this on April the 10th, and I cast it off on May the 17th. It's an all over lace cardigan with a drop shoulder, and it's a round neck, and again I used big statement buttons from Pigeon Wishes, and yeah. So the yarn that I used is a, I can't remember now, is it a 45? I think it's a 45-55 cotton and wool blend. And I knit this to wear to a christening and a wedding that we had last year. Not the same event, different events, but I was wearing the same dress, and so I thought I'd knit myself up a cardigan to go with it. And they were both happening in the summer, so I decided to use a cotton and wool blend so that I wasn't going to get too hot. And I didn't really love knitting with it. I thought that because I had used the Loch Lomond, that I thought maybe using another BC Garn yarn was going to be another like great yarn, but yeah, I just didn't love it, and I don't reach for this. I mean, partly that is because I knit it specifically to wear to those events, and I did wear it to those events, and it was great for those, but yeah, this isn't very warm. I don't really tend to reach for it because, I mean, to be honest, I didn't knit it to be warm, so, you know, that's not really not serving its purpose. But yeah, I think also the colour wasn't a great choice for my wardrobe. So I wear blue jeans a lot, which means that I don't really tend to reach for blue garments to wear on the top half as well. So yeah, it doesn't get a huge amount of wear from that. And the dress that I got to wear to those events is not a dress that I can wear like day to day anyway, so it's not really something that I'm going to reach for a lot. But the main thing was that this yarn also made my wrists hurt a fair bit. I think it's because this was also knit up on fairly big needles. I think it was a 5mm needle, and that cotton and wool blend just doesn't have as much elasticity to it, and so it's just a little bit harsher to knit with. And yeah, it just gave me some wrist pain. Big needles and sort of less bouncy yarns just don't seem to work very well for me when I'm knitting. But to be honest, I think the downfalls of this pattern are nothing to do with the downfalls of this garment, sorry, are nothing to do with the pattern. The pattern I would knit again. I think I would probably end up knitting it in a wool, maybe like a Cascade 220. I think a lot of people use that for the test knit as well, or maybe Double Sunday from Sanna's Garn, so that it was a bit more of like a spring garment. Our springs are not particularly warm here, and I still get quite cold in the spring, but it would be nice to be able to wear like a lace cardigan in spring and not be too cold. So I think this is something that I would probably want to knit up again, but in a different colour and a different yarn. So I will be probably wearing this in the summer. When it's like before it gets really, really hot, I will probably try and integrate this into my wardrobe a little bit better, so that I can get some use out of it. But it's just, I don't think it's ever going to be a garment that's going to get as much wear as my like wool sweaters and things like that. It's just, it's got a different vibe. But yeah, overall I like it, I just don't wear it very much. So that was my Sanna cardigan. And that was everything that I knit in May. So now we're into June, and June was kind of like my month of knitting a lot of t-shirts. First up we have my Thi Sweater, which although it's called a sweater is actually a short-sleeved t-shirt, and it's another Intarsia in the Round project. So I really wanted to try out this technique again after I used it in the unicorn sweater. And I used Sanna's Garn Sunday in the colours Kit, and I'm not sure what this blue is. I used it to knit an Oslo hat for my husband, and I can't find the colour again in their colour chart, so I'm not sure what it is, but it is a mystery sort of dusky blue. It's a beautiful blue, I just don't know what it is. So I knit this up in size 1 again, and I cast it on May the 30th, and I cast it off on June the 12th. So again, another fairly quick project. And this was a pattern that had been in my pattern library for a really, really long time, and I just hadn't got around to knitting it. It was another one of those ones where I tried out a couple of different yarns and cast it on a couple of times and just didn't like it. And I had this Sunday sat in my stash, and just picked it up and decided, you know what, this yarn is going to be this t-shirt. And I'm really glad that I did, because I love this. I get a lot of wear out of it. I still got quite a lot of wear out of it in June, to be honest, because it wasn't that warm for a little patch, and so it kind of made it quite easy to wear. The fact that this is merino as well kind of made it a little bit easier to wear, because it's a little bit more kind of temperature regulating. It wasn't ridiculously hot, so I was able to get a little bit of wear out of this, especially since it was a t-shirt as well, so it kind of just gave it a little bit more longevity in those warmer months. But yeah, it's kind of one of those garments that just goes with everything. This colour is definitely something that I have a lot of in my wardrobe. I wear a lot of like white t-shirts. I need to change my battery, bear with. Okay, we're back with a full battery now. So yeah, it's kind of one of those garments that I can just chuck on with anything really. It goes really well with my jeans, it goes well with skirts. Yeah, it's just an all over really great knit. It comes with a couple of options, so you can either do it like with a little bit more positive ease with like a boxy hem, or you can do it with a fitted hem where you do some decreases, and I chose to do the one with decreases, and I think it makes it way more versatile. I think I might want to knit another one of these at some point in maybe like a lace weight and a mohair or something. Actually no, sorry, not mohair, like a lace weight alpaca and a fingering weight or something, just for a bit of like a thicker, more boxy kind of cropped sweater, maybe add in some long sleeves with the without the decreases at the bottom. So use the boxy hem, because I think that would really fit in well in my wardrobe. And I really like this kind of like broken stripe pattern in the intarsia. It was so much fun, and it really gives it just a little bit more of a unique look to what could be a fairly basic t-shirt. To be honest, I think this would look beautiful. Like, the fit of this is stunning. So if you didn't want to add in the intarsia, it's a great pattern if you just want a kind of like mock neck, sort of almost puff sleeve cropped sweater. It's absolutely wonderful. I absolutely love it. And I can't wait to be able to get back to wearing this once the weather warms up a bit. It's just a little bit too cold for it at the moment. I think the yarn was a great choice. Sunday is such a beautifully soft yarn. It's next to skin soft. Yeah, there's a reason why people use this for baby knits. It's just beautiful. It has no irritating factor to it whatsoever. And I think it ended up being a really great choice, because obviously the neckline of this is just that little bit higher, so it does obviously touch the skin at the top of the neck, which is obviously quite a sensitive area. But yeah, overall, absolutely love this. Wear it a lot. Really great pattern, really well written. I think it's really underrated. It's got lots of options in it. It's size inclusive. It's well written, and to be honest, yeah, probably will end up knitting myself another one. Maybe a black fuzzy one in a lace weight alpaca. That would be really nice. I mean, to be honest, I'd love to be really bougie and knit myself a cashmere one, but you know, my bank balance would not be happy with me for that. But yeah, that is that is the Thi Sweater by Casey Knitting Co, and I absolutely love it. So the other garment that I finished in June was the Monica Geller tee, which is a pattern by Sari Nordlund. And I knit this up in folk fingering in the colour Holt. One skein of this was gifted to me by my friend Laura to test out. It was just as she was about to launch folk on her website. So yeah, I knit myself up a lovely woolly knitted t-shirt. So I knit up size 1 in this pattern. It's another bottom up pattern. It's a satin sleeve, and it's based on a sweater that is in Friends that Monica wears, and it's a white sweater. The pattern has twisted rib. I swapped it out for 2x2 rib, which I absolutely love. I love a bit of 2x2 rib at the moment. But yeah, I cast this on June the 6th, and I cast it off on June the 22nd, and unfortunately I haven't got a lot of wear out of this. Because I finished it in June, and folk is quite a woolly yarn. It's quite rustic, but I find it next to skin soft. But I'm not saying that I'm not saying that everybody would, because it is a little bit more rustic than, say, like the Sunday. But yeah, it's 100% non-superwash wool, and it's very warm. This t-shirt is very warm. And so it's probably one of those ones that's better suited to springtime, where it's still a little bit chilly. Our autumns are still somewhat warm here, and then we kind of it like suddenly changes into very cold weather. So this is definitely going to be more of a spring garment for me. So I think it's going to really kind of come into play in my wardrobe later on this year. But either way, I loved knitting up this pattern. I actually really enjoyed the fact that it was bottom up, because it was very mindless until you got to where you needed to split the sleeves. But then it was fairly simple. It was just like knit the right side rows, purl the wrong side rows, and do a couple of decreases. It was a really, really fun knit. And then the sleeves are knit using short rows to shape the sleeve cap. And yeah, it was really quick and easy. I think the fit of it is really, really nice. And I think I would love to knit more of these. I'm really into the idea of just having more knit t-shirts into my wardrobe, and so that's something that I'm really glad that I did a lot of last year, knitting up knit t-shirts, because I will be wearing these quite a lot. I've worn this a fair bit over the winter actually, just underneath my jumpers, and it has kept me wonderfully warm. So yeah. Yeah, not really much else to say than that. The yarn is beautiful. Laura has brought out more colours in this yarn, so it's definitely one to check out. It comes in both a DK and a fingering weight. This is the fingering weight, but it puffs up really beautifully. Like, this is real. The pattern is knit at a relatively loose gauge for a fingering weight yarn, so I think that Folk was the perfect choice for this. And yeah, I kind of want to knit myself up one of these in the undyed Folk. I think that would be a really lovely addition to my wardrobe, especially for the spring. So yeah, this is a colour that I don't really tend to wear very often, so it was really a bit of a challenge to kind of integrate it into my wardrobe, and it's still one that I'm working on, but I absolutely love this. The pattern was really easy to follow, as with all Sari Nordlund patterns. Yarn is beautiful. I just knit it in the wrong season. So yeah, that is my Monica Geller Tea by Sari Nordlund. Okay, so July now, and first thing I finished in July was another garment for my daughter. Now this is the Rosa Little, and it's a pattern by Along AVEC Anna, and I ended up knitting 2 of these this year, so this is the first one. I used West Yorkshire Spinner's Signature 4-ply in the colour Marshmallow, and I knit up the age 4. I cast this on July the 3rd, and I cast it off on July the 4th. And this was like an emergency knit that I knit up because we were going to a wedding where my daughter was the flower girl, and although it was July, the day of the wedding ended up being the coldest day in July. It was really, really wet, it was really chilly. I mean, it warmed up towards the end of the day, and the sun came out, but the actual wedding portion, it was really, really cold. And so I had been looking at the weather a couple of days beforehand, and I was like, oh, okay. And because it was July, I couldn't find any like nice little cardigans or anything to go with the dress that she was wearing that were gonna work with it. And because she was like in the wedding, I felt like it was really important that it kind of went with the dress, so when she was in the photos and everything, she wasn't having to like whip it off all the time. And so I couldn't find anything in the shops, didn't have enough time to order anything online, so I ran into my local yarn shop and grabbed a skein of West Yorkshire Spinners and these little sparkly flower buttons, and I like speed knit this cardigan. So it's a top-down raglan with these lovely little eyelet details on the raglan, and it's another one of those patterns that it's a fingering weight and mohair as the suggested yarns, and I just omitted the mohair. I think it's like a 23 or 24 stitch gauge, so it was fairly easy to just substitute for just a fingering weight, and I think it worked out really, really well. I pretty much knit this completely to pattern. I didn't do any like tubular bind offs or anything. I just did a standard bind off, and I just did a long tail cast on, and yeah, I think I shortened the body a little bit. It was already a cropped pattern, but I shortened the body a little bit so that it just came to the bottom of the bodice of her dress, because it had like a big puffy skirt on it, and so I thought, oh, that's just kind of like an easy place to get this to stop. And yeah, it ended up being the perfect garment for the wedding. It was a really, really good little piece for her to wear because it went with what she was wearing, it went with the rest of the like bridal parties outfits, but it was really understated, and just I think the pop of the little sparkly buttons kind of elevated it just a little bit. It is a beautiful pattern. It went really, really well. I think there is a Rosa bridal for adults, and so yeah, if you are looking for something to knit for a little one to wear to a wedding or a special event or something, then this pattern was great. You can elongate it so that it's a full length, and yeah, it was just a really successful little quick project. Now, I definitely wouldn't suggest knitting a jumper in essentially what was like 36 hours, but yeah, it was definitely well worth it. But yeah, very, very happy with how this turned out, but definitely don't want to be knitting up a cardigan in 36 hours again. But yes, that is the Rosa Little cardigan by Along AVEC Anna, and that was the first thing that I finished in July. The next thing I finished in July was a knit that took a lot longer to knit, and this is the Colour Tip Tee by Emily Curtis, but this is heavily modified. And I use, because I was knitting this for my husband, and I use Sanna Cardigan Tin Pear Gint in the colour 1042, and then the accent colour is Folk Fingering in the colour Autumn Broad. And so this is completely custom sizing. I did use like the stitch counts and everything for various sizes in the pattern. All of those are detailed in my Ravelry project, which I will have linked down below. And I cast this on May the 6th, and I cast it off on July the 22nd. So another fairly long-standing whip, but one that took a lot of brain power and kind of a lot of like trying on and everything to get the fit just right. So this is a fingering weight project that I knit up for my husband, and I first of all had to modify it so that it was long sleeve because he didn't want a t-shirt, and the pattern is knit to be a t-shirt, and obviously I had to change up a lot of the sizing because this is made for women's sizing and not men's, and so I had to sort of like measure various bits of him and then pick sizes to match that, and then work out how I was going to blend multiple sizes together so that it would fit his frame and not have any like lumps and bumps anywhere. But to be honest, worked out really, really well. I had originally intended to give this to my husband for his birthday, but I missed that by a month. Not to worry though, because to be honest, it was too warm for him to be able to wear it anyway. To be honest, I'm not all that fussed. Like, he wasn't all that fussed and I wasn't all that fussed that I didn't manage to give it to him for his birthday, because we would both rather get the fit right and have spent a little bit more time on it than give it to him and it not fit and then have to do a lot of modifications afterwards and everything. I feel like that's just a very anticlimactic birthday present, whereas this ended up being such a good fit on him that it's now one of his most worn sweaters. He wears this, I'd say, 3 or 4 times a week. I think I've only had to depill it once as well. So the yarn was an absolute triumph for this pattern. So my husband's jumpers, they get worn a lot and they do get quite a lot of wear. I'm not really sure how or why his jumpers get more wear, maybe because he doesn't have as many as I do, or he doesn't sort of like rotate them as much, or he just moves a lot more throughout the day. But yeah, I have to depill his jumpers a fair amount, but not this one. Yeah, this yarn holds up really, really well. It's a 100% Norwegian wool. It's a little bit more rustic. It's definitely not like super duper soft, but it does soften up beautifully with washing and wear. So I knit him another one over Christmas, for Christmas. And when I was sort of feeling that one as I was knitting it, and then I felt this one, I was like, oh my goodness, this yarn really does change after it's been worn and washed and things. But yeah, it's got beautiful structure to it. This doesn't end up looking stretched out at all. I think I haven't washed this actually since I blocked it. No, I haven't. I have not washed this since I blocked it after I finished it. So yeah, it's not getting stretched out at all. The ribbing is still staying absolutely perfect. Yeah, this was just possibly my most successful knit of 2024. He absolutely loves it. I think I've said a couple of times in the podcast how he asks for one of these in every single colour so that he can just chuck one of these on and a t-shirt and his jeans and go to the office, and it is really effortless wearing for him, but he feels somewhat dressed up. Not dressed up, but like somewhat more formal than he would be if he was wearing like a hoodie and jeans. So yeah, for 6-month wear, this one is doing really, really well. And like I say, he absolutely loves this jumper, so I'm really, really happy with it. I'm really glad that I took the time to work out all of the measurements and everything correctly. I'm really glad that I took that extra time and didn't rush it for his birthday. Yeah, just really happy with how this turned out and really happy that he loves it as much as he does. So yes, that was my first colour tip tee. Actually, I think both of the things that I finished July I ended up repeat knitting. So yes, that was that. And now those were the only garments that I finished in July. So as for August, I only finished one garment in August, and it is possibly one of my favourite garments of the year. It's definitely one of my most worn. And this is the Lily Top by Iris of HIRIS Makes. I knit this up in Cardigan Lana Cotton in the colour 212, no, I knit it up in Cardigan Lana Cotton 212 in the colour purple, and I knit size 1, and I cast this on July the 27th and I cast it off on August the 7th. And this was another thing that I knit by Iris, but it was not a test knit. And this is possibly my most worn knitted tee of the year. So the pattern and the yarn that I chose for this have just made it the easiest thing to just chuck on, the easiest like knit tee for everyday wear. So much so that when the weather starts warming up, I have plans to knit myself a fair few more of these in various different colours, because it's just the most amazingly good everyday tee. So it's a fingering weight 50/50 cotton and superwash merino yarn that I used, and it's just lovely. It's obviously next to skin soft because it's cotton and merino and it's superwash, so there's no tickle factor in there whatsoever. But despite the fact that this was another 50/50 cotton wool blend, this doesn't give me any wrist pain like the other one did that I used for my Sanna cardigan. And I think it's because this one is just so much more lightweight. And so it was on like a needle size and a gauge that was comfortable for me to knit. And so I didn't really notice the change in the fibre content as much as I did when I was knitting with the heavier weight cotton and wool blend. But yeah, I love the details on this t-shirt, the fact that it's a rolled neck and also it's got rolled edges on the ends of the sleeves and the body. It just adds a little bit more of like a summery look to it, and it just makes this just really easy to just chuck on. There's no fuss when you're knitting it. There's no like, you don't have to bother with any ribbing. It's literally just pick up the stitches, knit a few rows and then bind off. It's just the perfect knit tee. And yeah, like I say, I want a lot more of these in my wardrobe. One thing I will say is that I have never been unhappy with the fit of a pattern that I've knit up from Iris. She is so good at including any notes that you would need to like alter a fit of a garment to fit yourself better, how best to measure yourself, to pick your size. She just puts in so much work and so much detail on making patterns that are going to fit you the best way possible, and how to obviously alter them if you need to. I think she's just a really underrated designer, and I'm really glad that I discovered her patterns because they are some of the best fitting patterns that I have in my wardrobe, and I absolutely love them. So yeah, that is my one finished garment for August, and I absolutely love it. So now we are going into September, which was quite a big month for finished objects. The last months of the year definitely were some of my more garment heavy months, probably because the weather changed and I felt like I needed more knit garments. But yeah, first one is one that I knit as a part of a knit along that was held by Hayley of Hayley Space and Morgan of Morgan Unravelled, and it's the Salty Days sweater by Veronica Lindberg or Kutova Kika. And I used Drops Lima in the colour 5310 and I knit up size 1. And I cast this on September the 1st and I cast it off on September the 18th. And it was such a lovely experience being part of this knit along. It was a really inclusive space. Hayley and Morgan made sure it was a really, really sort of like friendly, lovely group of people. And yeah, it was a lovely pattern to knit along with a group with, because it was so engaging and everything, and everybody was at different stages, everybody was knitting different sizes, but we could all kind of help each other out if we needed it. And yeah, I had so much fun knitting this. So this is an all over textured pattern. I'm sure you've all seen it before. It's a really popular pattern. I think Nitty Natty just finished up one as well. All of the edgings are in half twisted rib. And I used some frogged yarn from a previous pattern. So this Drops Lima had been hanging around in my stash for absolutely ages, and I think this is the pattern that it needed to be. I think it works really, really well for this pattern. Obviously it's like It's got really good stitch definition for all of the texture. It's kind of fuzzy enough that it keeps you warm despite all of the lace, but it doesn't sort of close up any of the holes and anything that you want to put in there from the yarn overs. And yeah, it's just a lovely cozy jumper. It was perfect for the autumn. It's going to be perfect for spring. To be honest, I just chuck a long sleeve top underneath it, and it's not really, it doesn't bother me to wear it in the winter either. But yeah, it's just a lovely all over texture sweater. But despite that, it's really easy to wear. It's just really easy to just chuck it on. And to be honest, I think that's because I managed to knit it in such a sort of neutral, kind of easy colour. I'm not sure how much wear I would get out of this if I knit it in like a big bright bold colour alongside the texture as well. It's definitely very easy for me to just chuck on. Now there is one thing that I'm not happy about with this jumper, and it is my bind offs. So on the ends of the sleeves and the body, my bind offs are just that little bit too tight. Like, I can still get my hands through my sleeves and it doesn't like squeeze me when I'm wearing it, but it is just that little bit tight. So like, I can't roll my sleeves up as well as I would like to, and it does sort of sit quite tight on my body, so much so that this bit kind of like balloons out and it kind of sits like that, which is fine. I mean, I quite like that look because it means that it doesn't like slip down over my bottom or anything, and then I need to keep pulling it up, and it makes it quite easy to kind of leave it at my hips and not need to tuck it in if I'm wearing like high-waisted jeans. But yeah, it's just that little bit too tight, so I think that might be something that I need to go in and fix at some point. But it does, they're not so tight that it really affects me wearing it. It's just something that I do notice when I am wearing it. So it's not high priority on the things that I need to go in and redo, but it is just something that I would be aware of if I were to knit this again, that I would do my bind offs just that little bit more loosely. But yeah, another really successful garment for 2024, and one that I had so much fun knitting. So next up on my finished objects for this year is another long-standing whip. This one took me a hot minute to finish up. And this is my Serkinet Cardigan by Kate Davies Designs. It is an all-over cabled cardigan. It was knit bottom up. And I used Drops Daisy in the colour Pistachio Cream. This yarn was gifted to me. And I knit this up in size 2. So I cast this on June the 20th, and I cast it off on September the 22nd. And so this did take me a fair while, but to be honest, it took a lot of work. It's like, it's all over cables. It's on quite a small needle size. The gauge is quite dense, and it is absolutely stunning. I do really, really love this cardigan. It was very, very involved to knit it. It was obviously one of those ones that you had to have the chart there in front of you all the time. So it was never going to be something that was going to knit up really quickly. The only thing that I will say is that I just don't reach for this very often. Firstly, because I finished it in September and it just doesn't scream autumn. The colour is definitely very much more spring. And so it's one of those ones that I think is going to sort of really come into play in my wardrobe later on this year, but also because the sleeves are just a little bit too short. So this has a balloon sleeve on it. It's just got these a couple of rows of like really rapid decreases just before you start the ribbing, and again it is half twisted rib, which is not my favourite to knit, but I do think it looks stunning, and I'm glad I put in the effort to do that. But yeah, it's not my favourite thing to knit. But yeah, the sleeves on this are just a little bit too short. I think I mentioned it when I finished it that they were a little bit short, but I thought because it's a drop shoulder that it was going to pull down a little bit more, and then the sleeves would lengthen a little bit. But that just hasn't happened, and they sit kind of like here, like that, and it's fine. I think that would be fine if I didn't feel like my hands were constantly cold when I was wearing it. Now I think I'm just one of those people that I prefer my sleeves to be a little bit longer, and so I think I need to add maybe like 2, maybe 3 inches to each sleeve. I have some leftover yarn, so I can do that. It's just one of those things that I need to I just need to do it. And actually maybe it's one of those things that would be really interesting to film the process of. So if you would like to see me like going back into some of my knits of 2024 that I think need fixing and fixing them, then please do let me know in the comments if you would like to see videos of that, because I think it would be a kind of useful thing to film, not only for myself but for, well, it would obviously like kind of give me the motivation to do it, and also it would probably be quite interesting to kind of see the process of it. So yeah, I once again used big statement buttons from Pigeon Wishes. I think this has just become a bit more of a theme for me. I love a statement button. I love these ones from Pigeon Wishes. I love all of their designs. I think they are beautiful. I love that they are resin, so they're a little bit lighter than using like a heavy metal button or anything like that, or a wooden button, so they don't pull as much. I feel like this was the year that I really managed to master knitting garments bottom up, and kind of get the lengths right and everything. None of them have turned out too short, none of them have turned out too long. They all fit beautifully in the body. It's just the sleeves that, I mean, to be honest, because they were knit from the shoulder down, it makes it much easier to fix that than it does to fix any body length issues. But yeah, that was my Serkinet cardigan, and hopefully I can get it fixed fairly soon and actually get back to wearing it in the early half of 2025. So one more finished garment for September, and it's one for my daughter, and this is the Sorgenfri Jacket Junior by Guri Pedersen, and I knit this up in folk fingering in the colour Autumn Broad. Now one of these skeins was gifted to me by my friend Laura, alongside the one that I used for my Monica Gellety, but I did use 2 skeins and I bought the second one myself. So I knit this up in the age 7 to 8, but I knit it off gauge, so it actually worked out being the, I think it's the age 5 to 6 size in measurements at the end. And I cast this on August the 19th, and I cast it off on September the 25th. And the pattern for this is another one that is made for fingering weight and mohair, and I chose to just use fingering weight. But to be honest, folk fingering is such a versatile yarn. I think it really can work really, really well for those kind of like, you know, those patterns that are made for DK or they're made for fingering and mohair, and they've got like a 24 to like 22 stitch gauge. I think folk fingering is a beautiful option for that, because not only is it as warm as like a fingering and mohair, it's a lot easier to, well, it's obviously, it doesn't have the itch factor that mohair has. And so that's why I chose it for this pattern for my daughter, because like I said before, she is not a fan of mohair, and this just gives the most beautiful fabric. So I think it's really lent well to the texture of this pattern. It shows it off beautifully. The stitch definition is absolutely stunning. This gets quite a lot of wear. She chose the buttons for this herself whilst we were on holiday, and I absolutely love them. I think they work really, really well with the cardigan. And yeah, so you knit the button band of this cardigan alongside the rest of the body, so there was no picking up stitches for that. It was a really easy going knit, and the texture pattern is really easy to follow. There's some decreases in the sleeve, and then everything's just finished off with 1x1 rib, and then I used tubular bind off on everything. And yeah, I obviously didn't get gauge, so I decided to size up, and I think that's worked out really well. This fits her beautifully. It's got enough ease in it that it's going to fit her for a little while. That was something that I really learnt this year, that I need to, although my daughter is sort of not that wide, she does, so if I just go on her measurements, then I always have to knit a much smaller size than the kind of like standard sizing would say that she should be, that I should be knitting for her age group. But she is very tall, so what I have started doing is just knitting the size for her height, so that I get the length, and then the width usually kind of like falls into place and is proportionate to that, even though it's probably getting more positive ease than the pattern really recommends for her. I'm not sure if that would work for everybody, but it's something that I have sort of worked out will work quite well for her, for knitting for her. And so this fits her really, really well and gives enough room for her to grow into it over the next couple of years as well, without it being like, without it drowning her in fabric. So I think, yeah, that's something that I'm going to do going forward, and it's maybe something that I should have done when I was knitting like the dot sweater for her earlier in the year. But to be honest, knitting for kids kind of feels like more of a learning process because they do grow so quickly. You kind of have to like do this sort of juggling act of knitting something that's going to fit them now but also fit them later but not drown them in fabric. So yeah, it's definitely something that I learned with this garment, and it's really sort of helped me be able to make things for her that are going to be long lasting and beautiful additions to her wardrobe. So yeah, another successful garment for her. I would recommend this pattern. I think it's beautiful. I think it works in every single colour. I think it works in a lot of different yarns. And yeah, it's just really easy going. Absolutely loved knitting this. I think I stalled on it a little bit when I was knitting it, but I think that was more just I was interested in knitting other things and this, that and the other that is kind of just sat for a little while. But to be honest, when I was knitting it, it was an absolutely wonderful pattern to knit. A little bit confusing in the formatting of it, but other than that, pretty easy to follow. And it's just so squishy. This is probably one of the squishiest garments that I've made for her, and it's just absolutely lovely, and I'm glad that she really likes to wear it as much as I like to sort of see her wearing it. So yes, that was my last finished object for September. Okay, so now we're into October, and another test knit that I did this year, another one that I did for Iris of HIRIS Makes, and this is her Amelia top. So I knit this out of the most luxurious yarn that I have ever used, and this is made out of Cardiff Cashmere Classic in the colour Nero, and I knit this up in size 1 again. I cast it on September the 26th and I cast it off on October the 14th, and it's just the most luxurious project that I have done to date, and it's beautiful. I absolutely love this. I always wanted to make something in cashmere purely to see if it was kind of worth the hype, and unfortunately I think it is. It's just beautiful. Like, it's obviously not something that realistically I could choose for every single project, but oh, it's just stunning. It's so soft and bouncy to knit up, and even like, and after blocking it blooms so beautifully. Like, it was one of those projects where, so Cardiff Cashmere Classic is a DK weight yarn, and it kind of, when I was knitting it, I was sort of thinking, oh, this like feels really thin. Like, this feels like a really lightweight DK. Like, am I going to get as much coverage as I thought I was going to with this yarn? And I think this pattern is knit up in like as an 18 stitch gauge, so it's quite airy. But it just blooms so much. It's just absolutely stunning, and you get this beautiful like little fuzzy halo as well, which I absolutely love. And it just weighs nothing. Like, I barely notice that I'm wearing this, but it's so warm and snuggly, and yeah, I kind of want everything in this, but also can't afford to do that because it's expensive. It's expensive yarn, but it's beautiful. This pattern has not been released yet. Unfortunately, Iris had an injury, which meant that she wasn't able to work on the pattern for it for a little while, and so it has been delayed, but it should be out sort of early 2025. And I'll kind of let you know in the podcast as and when I know more about the date that this is going to be released. But hopefully you'll be able to knit up your own versions for like spring summer, because it is obviously a knit tee. A little bit different to the other two knit tees that I have made by Iris. This one is a set-in sleeve, but it's a contiguous construction, which was a new to me construction, which was so much fun to knit up. So you get a set-in sleeve, but you're knitting it sort of using the same kind of process that you would for a raglan. So you start working flat, just to like do your short rows and everything and set it up, and then you knit in the round to shape your armhole. And so you end up with a bit more of like a slanting shoulder than you do with a standard set-in sleeve. but you get to knit it in the round using increases and everything. So you still get that beautiful fit, but you obviously don't have to pick up any stitches. So if that's something that you're not really all that confident in doing, or it's not something that you like doing, then a contiguous construction is a way that you can get a set-in sleeve fit and look without having to pick up those stitches and work the short rows. So yeah, and then you get the purl bumps at the ends of the sleeves and the body, and there's also one at the neckline, and then it's a 1x1 rib to finish, and it's a folded neckband as well at the top to just give you a lovely sort of clean finish at the neck. And then the bottom of the body is the same as the sleeves with the purl bumps and the 1x1 rib. But I absolutely love this. I wear this a lot. And as with all of Iris's patterns, the fit on this is phenomenal. And yeah, really recommend that when this pattern comes out that you grab yourselves a copy, because it's a lovely knit tee. And to be honest, like with the lily top, it's going to be one of those ones that I would love to knit again. I really do want to add more knitted t-shirts to my wardrobe this year, and so this is another pattern that I will be reaching for to do so. I've actually got some yarn in my stash that I want to knit up when the weather warms up just a little bit, but right now I'm still kind of like in my jumper knitting stage of the year. So yes, my third test knit of the year, and another super successful one for wearability and fit and joy of knitting. So yes, next up for October, the only other garment that I finished in October was another cardigan for my daughter, and it's another Rosa Little, and this once again is a pattern by Along AVEC Anna, and I knit this up using frogged yarn from a jumper that I knit her previously when she was about 2, and so it no longer fitted, but the yarn was still perfectly usable. So I frogged that, and this yarn is, oh, this button, there we go. This yarn is Lana Gatto Baby Alpaca 70 in the colour Pumpkin. And so I knit this in the next size up to the one that I knit her in the summer. So this is the age 6, and this is a DK weight yarn. And so I went up a size in the pattern to get the same fit as the first one, because this was a thicker yarn. And I cast this on October the 21st, and I cast it off on October the 25th. And so, yeah, this was the first like repeat pattern of the year, and it was based purely on the success of the first one. She absolutely loves that cardigan, and so I decided to knit her one up for the colder months that was just going to be a little bit warmer, a little bit more wearable when it's a bit more chilly outside. And it was also a part of her Halloween costume this year. So this was the first year that she really wanted to like get involved and have a costume for Halloween. She was going to go trick-or-treating and then decided that she just didn't want to. And so she wore this to hand out the sweets when trick-or-treaters came to our house. And she had a dress and a witch's hat to go with it. And yeah, it was just a lovely little addition. So I chose to use the orange because obviously it was Halloween-y. She ended up looking like a little pumpkin in this. And I added on these like autumnal themed buttons so that it kind of gave it more of an autumnal feel than a full-on Halloween-y feel. I was going to use some like spooky Halloween buttons, and then I thought actually it kind of makes it so that she can only really wear this at Halloween, whereas this sort of autumnal veg box style like harvest festival set of buttons that I found in my button stash meant that it was going to be a little bit more wearable throughout the rest of the autumn as well. And it was. She reaches for this even now. It's obviously not like autumn now, but she absolutely loves this cardigan. It's a really good one to wear over dresses because it is cropped, and I feel like a lot of the dresses for little girls at the moment have got those big poofy skirts on them, and so this allows her to be able to wear that without it being sort of squishing the skirt into her. And yeah, it's just a little bit more of a warmer option than the white one that I knit for her. It's still got the beautiful eyelet design down the raglan, and this one is also cropped. I changed the sleeves on this one so they weren't a like tapered sleeve. I added in a balloon sleeve just so that it was a little bit different. And I also lengthened the ribbing at the neckline, and I added in tubular bind offs on this one because I had a bit more time. I was not rushing with this one. It was still a really quick knit. It was just one of those things that just flies off your needles. But yeah, another really successful knit. I think I'm going to be using the Rosa Little pattern a lot for her. She absolutely loves these cardigans, and so yeah, they're a real staple in her wardrobe, and I'm really glad that she likes them so much. So yeah, that was the second Rosa Little of the year. Okay, so November. I finished quite a few things in November, to be honest. If you're still here, then thank you for sticking around for this. I promise we are on the tail end of all of these garments now. Okay, so first up for November is my last test knit of the year. This one has just been released, so you can knit this one. And this is the West Sand Sweater by Journey Through Yarn. So I knit this up again out of BC Garn Loch Lomond in the colours Pine, Sand, Moss and Nougat, and I knit up size 1. And this is an oversized raglan mock neck. It's got hair on it because I wore it the other day. It's a mock neck design. I've just got this loop in here so that I knew which was the back and front when I'm putting it on in the dark in the morning. But yeah, I probably will sew a label into it at some point. I just haven't got around to it. But yeah, it's got these contrast edgings on it, and then throughout the body and the sleeves there's these beautiful textured colourwork stripes. So once you get through all of the increases for the raglan and everything, and you've split for sleeves and body, you're not just knitting endless amounts of stockinette. There's the interest of knitting the colourwork stripes in there, and that just held my attention so well. And yeah, it stopped me from getting into the point. I always find that the body of stockinette sweaters is where I start to lose interest a little bit, and it's like I get stuck on body island instead of sleeve island, and so this definitely didn't end up being that way. It was engaging from start to finish, and I absolutely love this jumper. I wear it so much. So I finished this up obviously in November, and I was knitting this from October 3rd to November 3rd, so this took me just a month to finish. And I have worn this, I'd say, at least once a week ever since I finished it. Most times more than once a week. I apologise if you can hear someone's having construction done outside and they've just started, so apologies if you can now hear that. But yeah, I absolutely love this jumper. Again, this yarn was a perfect choice, to be honest. I think this yarn is a perfect choice for most things. Especially when it comes to oversized jumpers, because it is a woolen spun yarn. You get more yardage because there's more air in the yarn, so it weighs less. So this weighs almost nothing for such an oversized garment, and it is just like wearing a cloud. It's absolutely beautiful. I absolutely love it. And the yarn kind of, because it's sort of tweedy as well, it kind of makes the colourwork kind of blend in a little bit more. Like all of the colours that I use for the colourwork are in the main colour of the yarn as like little tweedy flecks. So it gives the jumper really lovely like continuity throughout of colour, and I just absolutely love it. I love how warm this jumper is, like both when I'm wearing it and also it's a warm toned sort of reddish beige, pinkish beige. Yeah, I just absolutely love everything about this. The fit of it is absolutely beautiful. It's like the perfect amount of oversize without sort of like being like really sort of cumbersome with the amount of fabric that you've got. The sleeves are absolutely stunning. They're not too sort of loose around the wrist. They've got like the perfect amount of ease in there. I absolutely love this jumper. It's one of my most worn jumpers, I think, and I'm so happy with it. I absolutely love it. I definitely would 100% recommend the pattern. It's really well written. Rebecca does a really good job of like explaining each of her techniques and everything. The chart is really easy to follow. Like, yeah, it's just a really, really lovely pattern. And it's just really, really wearable. It's just, yeah, I just love it. I absolutely love it. So yeah, definitely would 100% recommend the pattern, the yarn, everything. Absolutely love this. And yeah, I'm so happy that I knit it. I'm so happy. I love it. Okay, so next up we have a pattern that I knit up for my husband. This is the Let It Snow sweater by Han Rimmon, and it's a free pattern that's available on the Filcolana website. And I used Filcolana Pernille in the colours Thuja and Marzipan. And I knit this up in size 1. So I cast this on November the 5th and I cast it off on November the 18th. This was like a comfort knit for me whilst I was feeling really, really poorly. And it's a colourwork round yoke sweater. And it's got these lovely wintry trees. The pattern does have a flea stitch motif that goes down from the bottom of the chart throughout the sleeves and the body, so that you get like flecks of snow. And we decided to leave those off because it was my husband's preference to just have the trees, which I was perfectly happy to do because it meant that he was going to get a bit more wear out of it. And this was his Christmas jumper for this year and will be for many years to come. It's kind of one of those ones that I had been saying for years and years that I wanted to knit Christmas jumpers for us, and then it was kind of like a very spontaneous choice to buy the yarn and just knit them. And these were inspired by my daughter's Christmas jumper that I knit up in 2023. I knit her this, what is that one called? I knit her the Jingle Bell sweater, which is basically the kids' equivalent. It's just got one round of trees instead of two. And this turned out really, really nicely. It's a sport weight yarn, the Pernille, so it's not too hot. I always find that sort of festive jumpers are a little bit tricky because a lot of them are knit up in quite chunky yarns, and so they're going to be quite warm. But to be honest, when you're going in and out of shops or you're going in and out of like pubs or restaurants or anything, they've always got their heating cranked all the way up, and so it's very, very warm in there. And so you don't want something that's going to be too hot and bulky. So a sport weight yarn was definitely a really good choice for this. This fits him really, really well. I didn't really do any modifications other than I added in a folded collar, and I added in this like contrast edging. I'm sorry, the dog's knocking the tripod. I added in a contrast edging in the contrast colour for the neckband and the end of the sleeves and the end of the body, to match the colour tip tee that I made him earlier in the year. But yeah, really, really like these. It was definitely worth the time it took to knit the colourwork and everything. It didn't really feel like that much of a slog, this one, to be honest. But yeah, it's definitely a good choice if you're looking for a men's festive jumper that isn't too like in your face and garishly Christmas. It's just very understated, almost like wintry. And yeah, he really likes this. He wore it a lot at the end of last year, and I'm sure he will get a lot of wear out of it in the end of this year as well. So that was my husband's Christmas jumper, and that leads me quite well into the last thing that I finished in November, which was my Christmas jumper. And this was also the last garment that I finished for myself last year. So this is the Santa Baby pattern by Han Rimmon, and I also knit this up in Filcolana Pernille in the colours Marzipan and Thuja. So mine and my husband's are like opposites of each other, and then my daughter's is in very similar colours to mine, so they all kind of go well together. And I knit this up in size 1. I cast it on November the 19th and I cast it off on November the 26th. And so yeah, this was essentially very much the same as my husband's version. It was just knit up in a slightly smaller size. The chart is almost identical. It's just that the women's version has these extra sort of like star motifs in it, whereas the men's one is just trees. So yeah, they're almost identical. I did the same contrast edgings on this one as I did for my husband's. Mine also has the little pearl bump motifs. The women's version is supposed to have half twisted rib, as all of your ribbing is supposed to be half twisted rib, but I didn't do that because I am not a fan of half twisted rib, and I much prefer just 1 by 1. I think it looks really nice on this as well. The pattern was, I think it had an added strand of mohair in it for the women's one, and I just did it in the PERNILLE. Oh yeah, I'm not a massive fan of mohair either. And so I think because this doesn't have that extra fuzz, it just doesn't, it fit well with a 1x1 rib instead of the half twisted. But yeah, I love the fit of this jumper. It fits me really nicely. I actually have considered knitting myself a version without the colour work because I really like the fit of this. Unfortunately though, this is not a size inclusive pattern, and it was one of those things that I got really excited about, the fact that I could knit matching sweaters for all three of us, but yeah, it's just not size inclusive, and yeah, it's not something that I would knit again because of that, because I feel like it would be so easy to make it size inclusive. Especially with a round yoke, I feel like it's a much easier construction to turn into a small size inclusive pattern, and so that was really disappointing, and I'm annoyed at myself for not double checking that and getting overexcited and just thinking, oh yeah, I can knit all three of them to match. But yeah, not going to knit another version, because I think that you could probably get the same fit with like a DRK everyday sweater. But yeah, it's just a bit disappointing when that happens, because it would be so easy to just get those top end sizes. But yeah, so that was my Santa baby sweater, my Christmas jumper. So that brings me to my final finished garment of 2024, and this is another colour tip tee for my husband, once again patterned by Emily Curtis. And I knit this at a custom size, exactly the same sizing as I did for the first one that I knit up in July, and I used the same yarn, just in a different colour. So this is Sanna Cardigan Tin Pigment in the colour 1053, and then I think this green is called Forest Green, but I'm not sure of what the colour number is. It was just one that I had in my stash that we decided to use for contrast edgings on it. And I cast this on November the 5th, and I cast it off on December the 14th. You will have seen me knitting this, knitting the majority of this if you watched my Vlogmas series this year, last year. And yeah, this was my husband's Christmas jumper this year, like the jumper I gifted him for Christmas, not his Christmas jumper. Like I say, I knit this to exactly the same size and with exactly the same yarn as the one that I knit for him early in the year. The only thing that I changed was the decrease rate on the sleeve. So hang on, if I grab the first one. So this one, the first one that I knit, if I hold up the sleeve, you can see that it's got a very rapid decrease, and then it's just got like a tube of stockinette at the end. So the decreases stop here, and then it's just a straight sleeve. And it wasn't my favourite part of the jumper, and so I decided I was going to go in and change it on this one. And so you see this one is just a gradual decrease the whole way down the sleeve. And there's no just straight stockinette at the end, there's decreases all the way down. And all I did was, instead of decreasing every 4th round like I did on the first one, I decreased every 6th, and that meant that the last decrease was like 3 or 4 rounds before the end of the sleeve. And so it just gives it a little bit more of a kind of like polished look. It really doesn't change the fit very much. When he's wearing it, you can't tell that one's got like a load of stockinette at the end with no decreases, and this one does. The only time you can see it is when it's laid out, but I think it does make a difference. Like I said with the first one, once I finished that one and he'd worn it a little while, he asked for more of these in more colours, so that's exactly what I did. I just knit him up another one for Christmas, and he absolutely loves it. He's gotten a fair bit of wear out of this since I gifted it to him, and yeah, again, the yarn has softened up beautifully in washing and blocking. And I'm sure there are many more of these modified colour tip tees in my knitting future. He has already asked for a green one, so I'll probably do it like the complete opposites of this one, with the green as the main colour and the grey as the contrast. But yeah, they're just his go-to sweater. He absolutely loves them, and to be honest, I thought that knitting a fingering weight sweater for my husband was going to be a lot more tedious and a lot more kind of a daunting task than it actually has ended up being. I really like knitting these. They're really meditative, and because they kind of require a little bit of thought with the sizing and everything, and sort of scrolling through the pattern to find the sizes and obviously checking out my numbers and everything, it keeps them engaging throughout. And yeah, I really like working with the yarn. I really like the gauge that these are knit up at, and yeah, I just really like knitting these for him. I really love how much he loves to wear them as well, so it's definitely one of the more successful knits of 2024, and I'm just so glad that he really enjoys them. And that he reaches for them every day to wear. Those two have kind of been on rotate throughout his sort of winter wardrobe since I finished up the second one and he went back to the office after Christmas. So yeah, it's just so rewarding seeing him, and it's the same with my daughter's knits as well, seeing them love the knitwear that I create for them and love to wear them and everything, and not feel like they're wearing them just because I made them for them. Okay, and so that is all of the garments that I finished in 2024. It's been really nice to kind of do this reflection on everything that I knit and collate it all into one place and look at it all together and figure out what worked well and what I didn't really like, and what yarns I liked, what patterns I liked, all that kind of thing, and things that just didn't work very well, and that's fine. But yeah, I think kind of through making all of these garments I learned so much about my style and about my craft, and loads of things that I can take with me into 2025 through when I want to choose patterns and yarns this year. I'd love to know what you learned from what you knit in 2024, what you're taking with you into 2025. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please do feel free to give it a like. If this is the first video of mine that you're seeing, then please do consider subscribing. I have a weekly knitting podcast as well that I post every week on a Thursday at 6 p.m. GMT. So if that feels like your cup of tea, then please do consider sticking around. That's it for me this week, guys. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will catch up with you all on Thursday for the regular knitting podcast. Happy making!